Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome back to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your guide and gracious host along the way today, as always. Now, today's topic is art and entertainment, and I don't know, it's something that's sort of shifted in me. Like this question has always something I think of. It's a big debate in like, what is something art? Is it entertainment? And what really are the difference anyway? And this is what what is the difference? This is something that we're going to look at today. But for myself, I know that when I was out working, doing La Soirée and working in Opium in Las Vegas and pounding out the shows, I didn't have the same kind of feeling of being an artist as what I have now, where I am constantly in creation, both that I'm in creation with other artists that I'm working with digitally or in the flesh, and also in my own creative process that I'm currently plowing through, learning acts, learning skills, putting it all together, anticipating the response, testing out an act in front of an audience. Now I really, that somehow brings more this artist out, and I think creation lies at the foundation of what it means to be an artist, is to create something out of nothing, where there is just nothing there, and then I have this idea, and then I find a trick, and I find a skill, and I weave these things together, and it becomes a little bit like a poem in a way, where the act now is and a bit of excitement for what I'm working on now for a family audience, full of silliness and everything, but I also want to have something deeper going on. I want there to be levels happening so that you adults and people can appreciate it on different levels. And so I guess I used to maybe be more of a sort of practitioner of the craft. I would do my acts again and again, and I would have perfected those, but the creative and creation side of it has certainly escalated, and that has made me identify more in the role of artist. Previously I did say, of course, I said I was a circus artist or so, but yeah, what do you think? How do you see yourself? And what do you even think that art means? And are you an entertainer? Anyway, maybe to help you work out who you are and what role you play in the grander picture of entertainment or art or performance or just in everyday life, I am going to attempt to illuminate the subject of art and entertainment. So here we go. Art or entertainment, or art and entertainment, or, as we will see as this episode and the next, which I'll split it up. This one subject, we will deal with that in 2 episodes. And as we shall see in the next one, it might be that no spoiler alert. Well, there is a spoiler alert coming now, and that is that it's the art of entertainment. Now, in this warped state, the showman steals the crowd's time, but like a twisted alchemical Robin Hood, he returns it refined as showtime. A twisted alchemical Robin Hood, he returns it refined as showtime. Now, that's of course from the Illuminated Manifesto, and we have in the last 2 chapters, last few episodes, we've widened our perspective on 2 of the 4 pillars of showmanship. We've looked at the audience, and we have looked in depth at the showman, the one who faces the other way. And before we sort of delve into the next 2 pillars, which is attention, and finally we're going to look at shows as we give them the same treatment, let's just take a side trip to better grasp the relationship a performer has with their audience. Like, what is it that we actually do? It's about art and entertainment, and how do we frame what we do? And the approach that we will take is to look at this age-old question of whether a showman is an entertainer or not just or an artist, but could he be both, or and? Is what we do art, or is it entertainment? As you will see, this is for me very much tied up with the approach that a performer has to how their performance is experienced. And to throw a further sort of spanner in the works, that I'll say that right off the bat, that I believe that whether something is art or entertainment is ultimately a kind of false dichotomy. The question takes it as a given that art and entertainment are two separate things, something which I don't quite agree with. And we'll delve into this, but they're not one and then the other, but they're both at the same time. But any work of art can be more or less of each of them. This will make more sense as we go along our exploration, but before we get there, let's just have a look at the not-so-hidden value judgment, which lies implicit in us talking about art and entertainment, because these are not value-free. There is a kind of move in regards to value that's made when we talk about these things. And we'll look at that move now. The history of our craft is a history of entertainment. A showman is an entertainer. The history of circus, street performance, carnivals and popular music has been a history of entertainment. If you ask any person in the street to place magicians, jugglers, wire walkers, comedians and acrobats on a spectrum from art to entertainment, they'd surely place them on the entertainment end of the spectrum. The distinction made between art and entertainment is not merely a desire to just categorize or place something in relation to something else. It is also a value judgment. In the distinction, as perhaps a sort of unspoken given, is that entertainment is somehow less valuable. It's like a less valuable or valid pursuit than whatever art might be. Society in general places more value on the opera performed in the grand opera houses around the world than a busker playing the musical saw on a street corner. And what I will argue is that the important difference between the two is not about whether one is more or less valuable or one is more valid than the other, but that the important difference lies in the relationship between the showman and his audience, or the artist and their audience. Now, I appreciate that unless I properly define what I mean when I say art and what I mean when I say entertainment, we don't really know exactly what we're talking about, since both terms are simultaneously straightforward and nebulous. And I'll get to definitions shortly, but until then, let's just keep the terms in mind as the way that they are when we casually talk about it. Don't focus too hard on specificity. Leave your mind open and at ease with the terms as they are when we know what they are, before we start paying so much attention to them that you notice the diffuse edges and the entire term becomes shadowy and ambiguous. With this open attention in mind, let's proceed in discovering a cognitive move implicit in the way the value is implied in the relationship between art and entertainment as it exists in the popular imagination. Entertainment is somehow less than art, and the tricky bit of implicit reasoning hidden in the dismissal of entertainment as less than art, or the move that I'm talking about made, has to do with conflating seriousness with important, or seriousness with importance. There is no intrinsic link between seriousness and importance. That something being enjoyable or fun makes it less important than something deemed serious, tragic, or boring. This is a distinct move. It's a value judgment added onto rather than emerging from the distinction. It is a qualitative opinion that's been added. And everyone's, of course, entitled to have an opinion, but no one is entitled to have an opinion trump anyone else's. And in the dictionary installed on my computer, serious is defined as something which demands careful consideration or application. This is then, by definition, something that's worth applying effort to. This also means that if something isn't serious, it's a frivolous activity, or maybe even a waste of time. And when I read further on the list of sub-definitions of serious, there is one which pertains specifically to its use in relation to music, literature, or other forms of art. And in this case, serious means that the artwork requires deep reflection and invites considered response. This is just, yeah. The example sentence that they use is, she bridges the gap between serious and popular music. And that example seems very sort of pertinent to our project. Serious is not popular. Put a pin in that for now. And why not another pin in bridging the gap between the serious and popular music? I think that's close to what we would like to do. Like to do artful entertainment. Because entertainment is popular. That's part of its sort of definition in a way. More people saw the latest Marvel film than whatever art movie made distribution in the theaters. More people partake in popular things. This is a tautology. Popular means that it's enjoyed by the many. And a big reason for that is that it is fun. We've already seen this in some of the stuff we've talked about. And what's fun is just not really taken seriously. Only comedians take comedy seriously. Only clowns take the silly seriously. And I'd further say that serious artists, in exclamation marks, not exclamation marks, quotation marks, who seek to make a serious art, in quotation marks, see themselves above the showman wearing a red turban and tails making invisible eggs float in the air and only to become real in the hands of a child. They see that somehow they're better than that. Perhaps this distinction is even more prevalent in those who aren't artists themselves, but rather curators and purveyors of fine arts than with the artists. The latter perhaps being more clued into the fragility of the whole fine art enterprise. As soon as the pandemic hit, the first thing to be sacrificed was art in all its aspects, including theatre, opera, as well as entertainment. When it came down to it, art, and with it, entertainment, was universally understood as a luxury, not a necessity. All of a sudden, fine art wasn't serious or important enough either. It was relegated to some paint on a canvas serving to break the monotony of grey walls at the place of work, but not really necessary. Work, as opposed to art, is not frivolous, and in general it is not even fun, which is okay. Since we don't go to work because it's fun or to have fun, we go to work because it's serious and important and it pays the bills. For most people, there's a big difference between what they do for work and what they do for fun. Fun is what you do after work, first work, then fun. A large part of the human workforce behaves as if the important stuff that they do in their lives is the stuff they do at work. They shuffle numbers and spreadsheets, and they sell and they buy, and they go to work on building sites or in retail, playing important parts in the machinery of society. And this is what they do when they are serious. It's what they do that's not trifling or frivolous. The fact that they don't really enjoy it, or that it's perhaps outright boring, but that you still do it, even though it is boring, this just proves just how important it is. After all, if something bores us in our spare time, then we stop doing it. The seriousness of work is further demonstrated by the fact that the workers are compensated for the inconvenience and discomfort by getting paid. After all, a big part of what makes work worthwhile and thus serious for the worker is that it pays. Money is serious, perhaps the most serious thing of all. Getting lots of money for doing something makes it very serious. That's why certain high-end art bought and sold as investments aren't dismissed quite as easily as useless by the rich and serious, since buying and selling Picasso's paintings or Damien Hirst's decaying shark in a formaldehyde tank is big business, and big business is serious. The irony is that ultimately work is what you do that can afford you to do the things that you want to do, the not boring things that you choose to do to relax, to stimulate and rejuvenate yourself. As a broad generalization, one could say that people get paid for work, but pay for fun. And as I see it, Sitting in cubicles with boring strip lighting, fiddling with numbers, does not in any way contain any qualities that makes this activity more important than the core activities in circus, showmanship, literature, music, or drama. After finishing the serious shuffling of numbers and the conversations about neckties and money and stock fluctuations, one can only allow oneself this. Then when all that's done, then one can allow oneself this kind of frivolousness that art and entertainment offers. You have a drink with a friend and realizing that both of you have read the same book maybe, and before you know it you fall into a deep conversation about the meaning of life, and as they part they both wholeheartedly agree that they should do this more often. It is my own personal firm belief that it is moments like this which makes life worth living, which to me begs the question, why should that be any less serious? I hope these little considerations and shows this move of conflating serious with importance, that it in fact, it actually flips the importance of things upside down. It's art and entertainment which really tells you about life and enrich your existence. A rich and rewarding life is of utmost importance. Remember how we spoke about earlier, how Carl Gustav Jung, the psychologist back in the ancient times, like he said that the majority of those who came to see him weren't dealing with clinical neurosis, but with the lack of meaning in their life. And add this to what we looked at when we looked at the absurd and finding joy and meaning in existence, then this can actually be a life and death matter. So I think that for many of us, the things that we do when we're serious and go to work are not the same that we do to enrich ourselves and to make life enjoyable and meaningful. It does not increase our ability to understand ourselves, the world we live in, or the relationship between us and the world. In this way, it's not fulfilling the showman's obligation, which, as you might remember, is to leave someone enriched as a whole human being after an interaction. Art, culture, literature, circus, and music helps take us beyond our normal restricted ways of thinking. It breaks down barriers and it pushes limits. It is mind-expanding and it elevates our experience of the world so that we get a better view. And most of all, it's just awesome fun. A higher perspective can be found through this whilst having fun that allows us to see further and thus make more connections. But a higher perspective also allows us to think deeper and experience depth and to feel deeper, and all of this can sort of help connect us to a greater context in our community and connections and context. All of this is what creates depth, thus opening us up to act in ways that have deeper and more positive impacts on ourselves and the world, and in many ways that all of this is interconnected. And to me, this is the serious work. So, let's turn our attention to the terms of entertainment and art, as they can be diffuse and nebulous. Let's try and get our heads around what they mean in common parlance. And then I'll get to what I see as the key difference between the two. Art. Starting with a quote by my favorite poet, David Whyte. He says, "Art is the act of triggering deep memories of what it means to be fully human." To define art is tricky. In philosophy, there is still a lively debate about what art is, and also even whether it's even possible at all to define it. And we'll leave this debate as whether we can define art or so for another time. But as we go through this next bit of stuff, then maybe you'll see why. But what I want us to have before we proceed is just an idea of what people mean when they talk about these things. It's more kind of folk psychology, folk wisdom kind of thing. We're not looking for a specific philosophical ironclad thing. I just want to uncover these kinds of definitions to sort of begin by going back to the dictionaries, because there we find sort of consensus opinions. Dictionary descriptions must be short and as much as possible, they need to be unambiguous. And this can in its own way be limiting. So in a dictionary, all words are defined, not for their ultimate truth, but for the way that the words are used in common parlance and in writing or whatever at the time of the dictionary's publication. So let's look at some of the dictionary definitions for art and entertainment. Of course, if we looked at, there might be a book on the philosophy of art or whatever. John Dewey Wright has the art experience. There's lots of books about art and what it is. I mean, Gadamer talks about art and play and creation in his book Truth and Method, and these just go on and on and on about what it is, which I find interesting. But that's why we're ending up with definitions just that already exists. So if we look at the Google Dictionary, then art is defined as the expression or application of human creative skills and imagination, typically in a visual form, such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Take that one more time. The expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. That makes sense. Typically, this expression or application of human creative skills and imagination takes the form of painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. And this doesn't mention any performance, but still, we get the point. And so I'd sort of surveyed a few other dictionaries to find that they sort of seem to converge on art being any activity or product created by people with a communicative or aesthetic purpose, be that beautiful, appealing, or of more than ordinary significance. Art is a creation which expresses an idea, an emotion, or more generally, a worldview. So I've sort of concocted that definition a little bit, because they all say almost the same thing. So let's hear that one more time. Art is any activity or product created by people with a communicative or aesthetic purpose. And that purpose can be beautiful, or it can be appealing, or this is the kind of communication that it has, or it can be of any more than ordinary significance. It's a creation. Art is a creation which expresses an idea, an emotion, or more generally, a worldview. So, if I was to break it even further down to be more sort of directly related to showmanship, art is then an activity that someone does to express something which makes some kind of sense to others. That's sort of is very unspecific, but it also seems quite sort of deep, that it's whenever I do something, it needs to make some kind of sense to others. If you're just doing something which don't make any sense, and it can, like when some of the weirder Monty Python sketches, you can go, this is not making any sense at all, but because it makes so little sense, it sort of veers off into the absurd and the bizarre, so it still starts to make sense, and it becomes relevant because it is funny. So and then the fun of it and the ridiculousness of the situation, the shared common ground that tells us that this is obviously ridiculous, what they do, this helps give it some sort of sense. So sense is then a wide net. It's a wide open definition or wide open concept. As the first definition indicates, art should be of more than ordinary significance, then I like that too. And using the language that we've developed here along the way, we could say that a show needs to capture the audience's attention and craft it in a resonant experience. Like there needs to be a resonance between the performer and the audience. And any definition of art is very wide and open, since art itself is something which has a long and esteemed history of pushing the boundaries of what art is. So when Vasily Kandinsky and Hilda af Klint began painting abstract art at the beginning of the 1900s, or when Duchamp placed a urinal on a pedestal and called it Fountain, or when Jackson Pollock action painted or whipped his paintbrushes over the canvas, and when John Cage made the piece 433 consisting entirely of musical notation for pauses, so that none of the musicians actually played any notes at all on their instruments, then all of these pushed the boundaries of what could be art. All definitions after that of art needed to encompass these innovations as well as all what art had been until then. So I guess the definition of art needs to constantly sort of be updated to include whatever else has been there. Although one could probably take issue with whether what's presented needs to be of more than ordinary significance. Like, I don't know, like when Tracy Emin exhibited her unmade bed. The very everyday object gained its significance in part by the very exhibition. And that's the same that happened with that toilet. You put the urinal on the pedestal and makes it into something. So is that more than ordinary significance? So you're taking something ordinary and doing it in a less than ordinary setting, then that makes it very strange. So whenever a definition or a statement about what can or can't be art, done in art, or what it is or what is or isn't art, whenever something then gets said, like this is what it is, then someone somewhere probably is also famous for doing exactly something which falls outside of those parameters, which leads us to art constantly being defined and redefined and whatever. So this kind of brings us full circle back to this whole, how the philosophical discussion of whether it's possible to define art at all, that I mentioned in the beginning. Can you define something which is constantly changing? Anyway, I hope that all of this preceding chatting is enough to both get an idea of what art is and sort of problems that surround its definitions. And even though we've sort of said this is what it is, we're still going, it's probably more than that and it will change. So, but let's move on. Look at entertainment. Now, the general definitions of entertainment. I think they're a little bit easier to get your head around, it is for me anyway, than the art definitions. And I don't know exactly why that is, but maybe it's because it's less than, so it has a restriction on it. Entertainment is perhaps less nebulous than art in part because it has these certain limits, and many of the definitions that seem almost circular, like the Google Dictionary describes it like this: entertainment is the action of providing or being provided with amusement or enjoyment. Entertainment is the action of providing or being provided with amusement or enjoyment. The American Dictionary says public shows, entertainment is public shows, performances, or other ways of enjoying yourself. A richer description from Wikipedia, their entry on entertainment says that entertainment is a form of activity that holds the attention and interest of an audience or gives pleasure and delight. Holds the attention and interest of an audience or gives pleasure and delight. It can be an idea or a task, but it is more likely to be one of the activities or events that have developed over thousands of years specifically for the purpose of keeping an audience's attention. So, of course, this thing here, we see that they're using the words attention and turning it into interest, but they also here mention gives pleasure and delight. And they also sort of, in the end word, it says likely to be one of the activities or events that have developed over thousands of years specifically for the purpose of keeping an audience's attention. So that's really interesting as well. It's circus, performance, like we do it. That's, or in theatre and all this. So one observation worthy of a note here is that all these definitions describe positive emotions as part of the definitions, like pleasure, enjoyment, and delight. These are all necessary in making something entertainment. So I would say then that something is entertaining when it holds and molds your attention in an enjoyable way, as it happens. Like the actual experience of entertainment needs to hold and mold your attention and interest, and the net result of it needs to be that it's enjoyable, it's enriching, in what we talked about in the showman's obligation. And to me, all of this brings to mind the nature of a good conversation. some of the points made in a conversation might take some time to understand. They might be complex and even a little difficult. They might have to be explored for a bit to fully make sense. But as long as this exploration and the chat is enjoyable along the way, you can cover great distance in a conversation. On the other hand, if someone rambles on and does not let anyone else speak, like I'm doing to you now, then it ceases to be a dialogue, it's not a conversation, and it becomes a boring monologue or a broken conversation. Entertainment is a very particular state of experience. At its best and its most complete, you lose yourself in it. It completely engages you. Future and past disappears, and you exist only in the moment. You're transported into an altered time and space. This is the show time that we mentioned in the beginning of this episode. Like the Illuminated Manifesto describes this as show time, the altered space and time. And furthermore, the experience of being entertained is enjoyable and allows the audience to effortlessly pay attention and be carried along from beginning to end. And this I find important, this thing of effortlessly paying attention. So if you're watching a show and you begin to look at your watch or thinking about what to wear to the party you're going to next weekend, then it means that you have fallen out of the experience, which means that it stopped being entertaining. If you keep falling out, or the show fails entirely at pulling you back in, then the show is boring. And if something is boring, it is not entertainment. I will go so far as to say that being forced to pay attention to something which you aren't into is not a bad way of describing what boredom is. Most of us have a memory of sitting in a class, listening to a teacher drone on about something that you're convinced will never be useful for you in your life. And the subject matter, as well as the presentation of whatever it was that he went on about, is absolutely uninspiring. But since you have to, at some point, regurgitate some of these facts in a test next Friday, then you had to pay attention. This kind of boring experience is neither effortless nor enjoyable. And you find your mind refusing to cooperate. And if you don't leave class physically, your mind leaves. It begins to wander into the future or back into the past, and it compulsively flits to anywhere but whatever it is that the lecturer is going on about in the moment. So boredom has the diametrically opposite features of entertainment, like an acute sense of discomfort which can even get quite physical, making you shift around in your seat or experience all kinds of aches and pains, whilst entertainment carries you along and makes time cease to exist. Then the mirror of this is that boredom makes time slow down, and it makes it the only thing. Each tick of the clock takes an eternity. So you experience every second not just as boring, but as a kind of affront to you, a part of your life stolen from you, never to be returned. And in this moment, thoughts of mortality and how finite the amount of time left you probably begins to spring to mind. And we're going to end there for today. Keep it nice and short. Next week we're going to start looking more at this idea of effortless attention and its relationship to great art, and whether these two things are actually opposing each other. It might not surprise you to learn that I don't think so. So let's pause there for now and play the jingle. And I'm back after the jingle. I hope you had a good time while I played that short accordion jingle. So we're going to look further at art and entertainment next week, but for now we've kind of discovered that the difference between the art and entertainment lies not so much in what it is that is being done, but in how what is being done, if we're thinking of it from the point of view of shows, then what the audience feels about it. So we're going to expand on that idea next time and see what we learn. And then after that episode, we'll go in and look at a historic example from Goethe's Faust, one of the giants of literature, an important book, and the beginning of that one, which is called Prologue in the Theatre, which illuminates this sort of stuff, which also connects us up historically to seeing this debate of art and entertainment and how it has preoccupied great artists before, people that we now think absolutely as think of them absolutely as artists and not as entertainers. But more about that in the coming episodes. And for now, I'd just say it would be amazing if you, before we leave, that you would go over to iTunes and just click 5 stars. And it would be absolutely tremendous if you wrote that you liked it as well. These reviews really help people finding me in the algorithms when people type in circus or showmanship, or people don't normally type in showmanship, of course, but if they type in circus or some commonly used search word, I mean, as soon as I'm saying this, I'm going like, most people don't search for circus, but for those of us who do, then I'd love it if this episode came up. So if you could help me do that, go over there. It's free, it's easy. Go over and click on iTunes and leave an ecstatic and brilliant review of these episodes. It'd be great to get some of your friends or some of your collaborators to check something out. It's certainly been very interesting for me when I then all of a sudden meet somebody on my travels along the way, and I meet some person, and that person has already listened to a bunch of these episodes, and it's really interesting how you quite quickly can cut through a line of bullshit or whatever and get straight to talk about certain subjects more deeply and already have a deeper conversation. So tell your friends and your family if they want to know whether you are doing just being an entertainer. Let them listen a little bit to this and see how it connects to the greater world around. And that's what you writing a little review or you clicking 5 stars would help doing. That's all I have to say for today. Take care of yourself until next time. Take care of those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.